Why aren't spiritual entrepreneurs more successful? This is exactly the question I want to answer in this video and provide you with some academic context, some meta perspectives and meta frames, some of my personal experience coaching, leading, and guiding 6, 7, 8, and 9-figure entrepreneurs, as well as some insights from the depth of my 22-year spiritual practice. This is so important right now, because this moment in our history is when we need those people who are awakened, bright, and luminous. They're on their spiritual path to have the access and influence and leadership to help us all into the next iteration of ourselves and our society that we most desperately need now. I'm going to be offering this video as a hybrid collaboration for my PhD research and a class that I'm taking called Wisdom Design, in which we're creating systems of teaching and training and transformation, and I'm specifically focusing on spiritual entrepreneurs and how to help them build successful businesses that take that gift that they've cultivated in their spiritual lives, turn it into an object, a business, an offering that they can give out into the world and help support and sustain themselves and make the impact and income that they know that they're here to make and that will make a difference in the world. So this presentation is going to incorporate some slides as well as some video and some stories to help you see why a spiritual entrepreneur might make the decision to say, it's time for me to be successful. It's time to combine the awakening at the crown with the gift and the devotion of building a business down here on the earth. And I know that probably seems like a paradox. I know that probably seems like something that feels confusing and probably feels stressful in your heart, because we want to have the brightness of the experience of transcendence. But our mission was to come here, be a human being on earth, and serve humanity. So I want to provide a way forward for you if this is the quandary and the paradox and the quagmire that you're in, so you can start to hold your experience as a spiritual entrepreneur as a hero's journey and your business as a devotion to the awakening of all of humanity. So as I mentioned, spiritual entrepreneurship is what we're focusing on here. And I'm doing this, as I mentioned, for a class called Wisdom Design at CIHS, which is the premier institution for those on the spiritual path who are committed to finding that gift inside of them and deeply studying it in a PhD context. CIHS is an amazing school that allows you to do the research that you want, look at the things that you want, whether it's the spiritual awakening process, or you want to look at energy and energetics, the way energy is transmitted, and we can study it scientifically, or if you want to study things like UAPs and psychedelic integration and a whole manner of some of the most important cutting-edge topics of our time, CIHS and this program, Integral Noetic Sciences, is the way to do that. So this presentation, as I mentioned, is designed for a learning out loud. This is a concept I've had because I recognize that if I'm just doing my PhD, for me, that feels like a win-win-lose. I win, sure, in getting the information and the knowledge and the data from the PhD, and the school wins from having students, but I also want the larger collective to win. If there's insights, if there's information, if there's value that I can give to you from this PhD, this deep study, and looking at all these books that I can give to you, I want to be able to produce that for you and help you have a deeper understanding. CIHS I just mentioned, and this, the culmination of what I've developed in this class, is a program for spiritual entrepreneurs called the Wayshowers. The Wayshowers is a group of entrepreneurs who are taking that spiritual gift, the awareness, the brightness, the capability they've cultivated in their spiritual practice, and for those who know they need to turn it into something here on the planet, this program is designed to help you have a place and a community and someone who understands this process and the specificity and the nuances that are so different from traditional marketing, traditional business, and gives you the space to explore yourself to go on your own hero's journey and to find a way to turn this gift into a business. Now, not everyone is going to join this Wayshowers program. There's also a free group called the Enlightened Entrepreneurs I'd love to invite you into. There's hours of content in there and teaches you the being of entrepreneurship as a spiritual being, so you can get the internal orientation to entrepreneurship correct and energized, so you can now go out and do the doing of entrepreneurship, which is where the actual outcomes of creating more income and impact are going to happen. So in this presentation, I'm going to provide a number of things here. There's 3 schools I want to operate from, 3 ways of thinking. An immanent metaphysics, which is a metaphysics by a philosopher, modern day philosopher, alive and in the world right now doing the work of metaphysics, called Forrest Landry. This is also going to pull on Ken Wilber's integral theory, which I've studied deeply over the last 10 years. Integral theory is one of my favorite maps and models for looking at how we understand things, how we operate in the world, how we grow up, which is adult human development, how we wake up, which is the spiritual awakening process, how we clean up, which is doing the internal healing work so that we can evolve, and how we show up, which is our service in the world. And then lastly, critical realism, which is Bhaskara's work of doing critiques of modernity, the way modernity has come to create our economies and our modern perspectives, and find some of the chinks in those modern perspectives and the way that we see the world, so that we can unfold a new integral understanding of how these economies, how these businesses, how entrepreneurship in general has to evolve in order to include the high level of ethics that you have and the energetic awareness and the sensitivities, so that you can have that successful business you want to have. This is also going to look at first, second, and third person perspectives. And the reason spiritual entrepreneurship is so important right now is we want to engage and not be agnostic and not stick our head in the sands to this moment of this meta crisis. We have ecological collapse that we're looking at in many environments. We have corporate capture and control and really overstep and overreach and over manipulation of a populace. We have a government that is also seemingly in decline and in collapse. We have a populace that is divided and more divisive than ever before. We have people who are confused, and we have general strife. We have challenge. We have a way that we need to move through this meta crisis, and the way entrepreneurship has to engage this is going to change. It must change, and it is already changing, and I want to provide a way forward in that. So some novel additions that I'm offering here in the Wayshowers are an integral and metaphysically informed pricing model. So we want to look at how we're experiencing money, because money has been the way that people have shut down, gone into trauma, gone into confusion, and really hidden their gifts because they don't want to be seen as materialistic. It's actually painful for them, for spiritual entrepreneurs, to be perceived as materialistic and transactional. I want to tell you, you don't have to fall into that trap anymore. I'm charting some ways through that you get to take into your own exploration, your own experience, and find your right orientation to how money can liberate you and liberate those that you serve. And we can reframe and reclaim finance, money, and wealth, so that it's not something that harms and divides, but really it's something that liberates. So we land back at this question: why are spiritual entrepreneurs generally less successful than traditional entrepreneurs? You have this beautiful heart. You've cultivated these spiritual gifts. You have the bright, luminous awakening that has happened on your meditation cushion, in your psychedelic ceremonies, in your spiritual practice, in your endless devotion to understanding how the universe is put together. Why does that not translate to people naturally seeing that and want the service that you're offering? And I'm going to give the spoiler here, and then provide the context and the understanding over the next number of minutes to reinforce why this is the truth. The spiritual awakening work that you've done, the brightness of your illumination, the gift that you've developed in your body and in your embodiment, the energetic awareness and the tracking that you have, the devotion that you've put into being on the cushion and doing the practices and serving humanity is going to make you an amazing practitioner. It's going to make you amazing at helping people. It's going to give you insights to help people transform and change and grow. And that practitionership is really rich and deep. But entrepreneurship is different. It's a very different skill set, and we need to cultivate both, working in the business and working on the business. Now, historically, what I've seen with spiritual entrepreneurs is they hold themselves back because they're so committed to the other people that they're serving. And that gift that they're giving is so compelling that they assume that's going to make them amazing entrepreneurs. But learning the processes and the protocols and the strategies and the marketing and all these other aspects of entrepreneurship is actually a very different process and a very critical role to also come out of the transcendence into the immanence, plant your feet back on the ground, and learn the earth-based strategies, tactics, policies, procedures, and protocols so that the business can grow into something that has an ever widening arc of influence, so that you actually can be seen and acknowledged, so that you can be visible enough and have a clear and coherent message so that people who are out there who need your service can say, this person has something for me. This person has the thing that I want. If I work with this person, maybe I'll have that too. And that's the gift of entrepreneurship. That's the gift of building a business that's clear, coherent, concise, which often spiritual entrepreneurs have a lot of shadow around because the depth they had to go inside. They get afraid of being visible. They get afraid of being put in a box. They get afraid of what other people will think about them. And I'm going to invite you into an examination for yourself of if this is going to hold you back. This is an illusion. This is shadow that we get to move through, just like when you met fear on the meditation cushion, just like your spiritual ego deaths, just like all those illusions that you've moved through in your awakening practice. There's an illusion as an entrepreneur of entrepreneurship being bad, wrong, and evil. And we certainly have had evidence of that. There are people who are doing entrepreneurship in ways that is not caring, not considering, but that doesn't have to be the case. And I believe that you're listening to me right now because there's a lot of us that want to reclaim entrepreneurship. There's a lot of us that want to see it be something different. And we know in our heart of hearts, it's time for that. So one of the lenses that we have to look through in this process is a developmental lens. We're going to look at that through integral theory. Now, don't freak out. Here's a big map of integral theory. Now, when you have encountered integralists in the past who are so excited about this big map of integral theory, a meta system for looking at how all of reality in the cosmos is put together, it might look a little bit like this. They're so excited, they're so amped up, they're so passionate. It doesn't have to be that way. We're going to pare this down into 4 simple levels of consciousness development. We're going to pare this down into 4 simple concepts. Now, integral theory is a wide-ranging kind of perspective on how reality works. We're not taking the whole bite right now. There will be time for that. I want to start with just 4 levels of consciousness development. Now, most people in the spiritual entrepreneurship camp are familiar with the work of, say, David Hawkins that looks at the scale of emotions and other ways of looking at consciousness development. Consciousness development in this model is looking at how we evolve as individuals and how we evolve as societies. This is a way of looking at consciousness that has been researched and reified through over 100 different psychologists, sociologists, and other researchers who have looked at individual and social development in basically every culture in the world, and they found a ladder of how people repeatedly climb through these levels of consciousness development. So I'm presenting this as a way that you can trust this type of ladder of consciousness development. This isn't just some abstract woo-woo concept. This has been deeply researched and continues to be researched to find out how it works in individuals, in societies, and in businesses. So 4 of these levels are, first, the traditional level. We call this the amber level. This is the segment of society and the level of development in individuals that believe in a rule and role type way of operating, a black and white, good and bad, right and wrong. These are people who tend to have very rigid views. What's beautiful about this is it makes the reality very clear. It makes their understanding of how they operate in their reality very clear, and that gives them a lot of energy and certainty and clarity. This happens in classical conservatives in our society, not the new conservatives that are emerging, but the classical, what has historically been considered the right side of the political divide. But the challenge in this is that there is often pre-rational and pre-logical belief structures that are embedded into this way of looking at reality. And so that becomes problematic. They create in-group and out-group dynamics, which pushes whole segments of society away as wrong and bad, and they exclude them. So from there, the next jump in consciousness is when someone says, I don't want to be limited in that way. I don't want to be known and experienced just for my role in society. I want to move into orange, or the modern level of development. And modernism is really defined by motivation, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, being success-oriented, logical, rational, scientific, anti-religious, and anti-spiritual, and working from the ideas of the philosophical Great Enlightenment. So this philosophically is where the Cartesian split occurred, where we split into mind and body, man and nature. And while there have been many amazing gifts that have come from that, science and technology and the way that we've experienced it explode in the last 150 years, and the way that that transforms society, it also obviously comes with challenges that are very clear for spiritual entrepreneurs, that it disconnects us from our body, it disconnects us from nature, and it abstracts the way that we operate in our reality that still creates hierarchies that are problematic, and the striving disconnects us from our deep sensitivity and from spirit above. After people get tired of the orange way of looking at reality, and they get tired and say, there's got to be something more, there's got to be ways of working that feel better, they tend to move into the green or postmodern level of development. And that tends to value the feeling and the emotion. It values care and inclusion. It values all cultures, equality, justice, spirituality, energetics, and is anti-hierarchical. So there's a deep beauty in this, that we want to be more inclusive. We want to have ways of experiencing everyone and lifting everyone up so that everyone has a fair shake. Everyone has a chance. But the challenge of postmodernity, as some of you have seen, is that it slides into this kind of funny way of looking at equality, where it creates collapsings and flatlands of how we experience self and other. So it doesn't value a true egalitarianism, which is what they espouse, which is everyone should have a chance of being who they are. It tends to slip into a way of looking at societies where it actually wants to pull people down to the lowest common denominator, and then that stagnates everyone. The progress, the growth, which is so critical as a nutrient to our consciousness, actually gets limited and holds us back from having our own maturation experience, which you just can't stop, otherwise you become sick and ill. But there's good news. The next level of development is called integral, or teal. The teal level of development is all about modern multiple perspectives, holding multiple perspectives, seeking multiple perspectives, and as a mentor and the teacher of this course, Sean Esbjorn Hargens, has said, coordinating multiple perspectives. So this coordination is, how do we see the world from all these different ways? How do we allow ourselves to immerse in the complexity of the viewpoints that every person has? How do we relax our own internal perspectives and needing to be right, and really seek to understand the first person experience someone else is having, so that we really can have embodied understanding of what people are going through? And then how do we put these together so that we can find some way forward and a meaningful change? So the teal level of perspective wants to hold complex understandings. We want to serve humanity with them. We want to understand complexity theory, want to understand advanced systems. We are systems oriented, and we want to really get clear of what the most rational, good next step forward is for us and for humanity at large. Now, what does this mean for spiritual entrepreneurs who are actually creating a gift that they want to give away in the marketplace? Very simple. These levels of consciousness development can be looked at as the percentages of society under the bell curve and distribution of all of society. Now, this is important for spiritual entrepreneurs because the first and second standard deviation under the bell curve, so the majority of society, is going to land in this modern perspective. And in this modern perspective, we are going to see that this is what gave rise to capitalism and democracy. Now, I think capitalism and democracy are actually really good systems, and the developmental levels of most spiritual entrepreneurs just happen to be beyond that. So what this means is that we have systems and societies that spiritual entrepreneurs have actually moved beyond, but these orange markets are agnostic to the values that you hold. So this inclusion, this sensitivity, this care from a deeper perspective, and not just equality, but the real transformation that you hold as dear, is not what the objectivity of that orange level of development, the main level of development under the center two standard deviations of society, actually falls into. This means that in the marketplace, you are not excluded, but it's not designed for you. It's not designed with the things that you value most. It's not designed to be the perfect way for you to operate in a marketplace. And so we have to recognize that. And for us energetically, for us emotionally, for us in the way that we prefer to operate, those who are beyond that center standard deviation under the bell curve, this creates more drag. Now, this is actually where all your spiritual work is going to come in handy, because we need to build the community and the energetics so that we can be operating in this environment that's not as perfectly designed for us as we would prefer. We need to find our orientation to something that doesn't suit us perfectly well. And this is why spiritual entrepreneurship is a hero's journey. It's leaving the safety and comfort of our spiritual abode and entering onto a pathway, onto a journey, onto a quest in an environment, in situations that are not perfectly suited for us, knowing that it's going to be a process of evolution inside of us, and that process of evolution is going to serve us. It's going to serve the clients that we serve, and it's going to serve humanity at large as more and more people are impacted by the gifts that we're meant to give away. We also want to understand a little bit more about the spiritual entrepreneurs and the typological lenses that we need to look at in order to say, this is who I am, and this is why I'm having the experiences that I am. These people are going to have an inward orientation. So an example of this would be people who are intuitive and feeling types in the MBTI. These people tend to have a more inward orientation. They want to go inside. They want to feel. They want to be sensitive to others. They can't help it. It's just naturally who they are. They also tend to be sensitive, empathically sensitive. So they have a tendency to feel what other people are feeling. But we've seen that the people who are actually successful out in the business world tend to be the opposite of this. There's all manner of research that says that people who climb the social and cultural ladder in corporate environments really well are people who have dark triad and dark tetrad traits. The dark triad, or dark tetrad as it's been expanded to, is Machiavellianism, psychopathy, narcissism, and sadism. So their internal wounding actually is activated and energized by pushing people down, having power over people, and making other people hurt so that they succeed. That can't continue. And that's why I'm having this conversation with you, because this is not you. You are sensitive and caring. Your ethics are high, and the way that you want to operate and orient is very different. But we need to figure out how you get just as energized as those people so you have a competitive advantage. You have as much energy, as much dedication, as much devotion, but your ethics and your care are much higher so that we all get to be on the rising tide and the lifting up into a culture and a society that is serving each other, not taking advantage of each other for your own personal gain. This all leads to an orientation where we value care and connection over just personal benefit. So we want to personally have benefit from who we are, how we be, and what we do, but it can't happen at the cost and the expense of others. So another lens that we need to look at is actually understanding more about the spiritual awakening process, because there's actually different levels of spiritual awakening. This is another thing that's been defined by integral theory, as well as the schools that it's pulled from. So again, Ken Wilber in integral theory looked at the spiritual traditions all over the world. So what Ken found was that there was actually a ladder of awakening that all spiritual traditions across the world have found. And the way that we look at them in integral theory is 4 different primary types of awakening. We have an awakening in the gross realm, the subtle realm, the causal realm, and then non-dual unity consciousness. Let me explain. This lens of the states of spiritual awareness and spiritual development has historically looked at that process as an ascendant process. So we are climbing into our awakening. We are ascending. And the goal of the spiritual experience has been to have peak and hopefully sustained peak experiences. And that is so fulfilling. It's the reason for being for so many people, to have ever more bright, awake, and aware, vast and expansive experiences of who they are, how they operate in the world, and what the nature of reality is. I want you to have that. I want you to know those experiences. I want that awakening to be bright and substantial. And why did you come back here as a human? Why did you come into this body in this time? Why are you here on the planet? Was it just to ascend? I believe there's a secondary path for the spiritual entrepreneur, and that is the imminent path. Because what we found, what the research shows, some research by Jeffrey Martin, who did a bunch of research on spirituality and awakening called the Finder's Work. Jeffrey Martin saw that the higher we go in our spiritual awakening process, the less useful we become to reality. The more abstracted and ascendant we are, the more disconnected we are from the earthly plane. And now that ascendant path may be your goal, and I honor and respect that. I appreciate that, and thank you for doing that work. That's so important. And I believe that spiritual entrepreneurs need to take that ascendant work, bring it imminent, and build something back here on the planet. This 3D realm, this gross realm, this physical reality is where other people are. It's where we have to make an impact. It's where we need to do the work of waking up the others so we can all climb the ladder together. So a quick romp through these states of spiritual development. The gross realm, physical 3D reality. It's where we have matter. It's where we have bodies. It's where we have a beingness that is enacted. It's also where we encounter others. It's where markets and marketplaces exist. It's where money happens. It's where we interact as human beings and we liberate each other into our own and each other's best selves. The next level is where most spiritual conversations tend to focus, which is the subtle realm. It's the energetic. It's the visionary. It's where we go in our dreaming. It's where we experience that interpersonal connection that is beyond words. It's where we have the experience of touching the fractal nature, the visionary nature of reality. There's a lot of spiritual work that happens here. And one of the great gifts of the spiritual entrepreneurs is that they're conversant and fluent in the language of the subtle realm. And it's our work to bring it back down in the gross realm and give it away. The next realm is the causal realm. This is the void. This is the vast spaciousness. This is the nothing. This is what has been called the luminous darkness, that place beyond the duality, that place beyond the energetics, that nothing from which all things arise. Those of you who have touched that place know this well. And there's often an avoidance of this place because it's not as bright and shining and entertaining as the subtle realm is. We come into a fundamental touching and contact with the isness of reality, with the emptiness that's talked about in the Buddhist sutras. And there's a type of action this has on the soul and on the awareness that creates a much different embodiment and a much different experience of how we do transformation with others. Suddenly from this space we have wide open capacity for being with much larger swaths of the human experience. And that's a beautiful and important thing for us to cultivate. And then lastly, the non-dual. This is the unity of all things, the true oneness, the embodiment and the accessing and the holding of the nothing and the something all at once. This is Buddhahood. And most of the time, people who have the breakthrough into the non-dual unity experience tend to have a non-abiding awakening. They go up, they taste the oneness, they have access to that for a moment, and they come back down into their life and try to find ways to integrate that. We've already talked about the meta crisis and all of the wicked problems in the world, and I'm sure you're aware of many of them. But we also want to look at this in an understanding of the rhythm of societies and cultures. This work, sometimes called The Fourth Turning, based on a book called The Fourth Turning by Strauss and Howe, says that there is a rhythm to how societies rise and fall, how strife occurs. This was also talked about by a researcher named Peter Turchin. In The Fourth Turning, the way that we look at societies is that there's 4 seasons. These seasons are, of course, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And the experience of the generations that are raised in each of those 4 seasons is going to be fundamentally different. I won't go deep into this. If you want to examine The Fourth Turning, there's a new book out called The Fourth Turning is Here, which was written by Neil Howe. Strauss passed away. He carried on the work to talk about The Fourth Turning because we are now in the season of winter. And in the season of winter, the rules are very different. Winter started in the 2008 economic collapse, and we are in the last 5 to 10 years of that process before the next great turning happens, the fourth turning back into spring. But the rules of economics and entrepreneurship are different in winter. You can just imagine those who have lived through winter, the way that you have to use your energy, your focus, your attention, and your intention in winter is very different. So we want to acknowledge that and bring that into the conversation of how we do entrepreneurship now. Because people who were born in the summer and in the autumn tend to have a very different natural inclination and habit of how they interact, how they view money when resource was abundant versus now, as you see more and more prices are rising, inflation is high, the GDP, the dollar is all changing. And the way that we engage that for ourselves and our businesses has to reflect that. Simultaneously with this fourth turning, we have what Claire Graves, who developed a system called spiral dynamics, which is incorporated into integral theory, we have what Claire called the momentous leap. This is that leap from green into teal. Teal has the great gift of recognizing all of the amazing aspects that came before of each of those developmental levels. And it wants to find ways to move everyone in their next step through those levels and harvest the gifts, but not get caught in the traps, in the problems, and in the ways that those developmental levels can destabilize the ladder and the climb that we're all taking. Now, embedded within reality is three fundamental perspectives. Throughout all of Western philosophy, back through the Greeks and back to ancient Hermeticism, there was three ways of looking at reality. And these three perspectives are actually the creation blocks of all of the physical realm. So metaphysically, this big three is the I, the we, and the it. If you look at the reality around you, you will not find anything else besides the I, the we, and the it. The I, my internal, personal, subjective experience. The we, the intersubjective experience, that relating, the way that we operate in relationship to each other. And the it is the things. It's the actual physical objects. It's the matter of reality and the objects that we create. So in this way, we can use the I, the we, and the it to understand a cosmology, as I mentioned, and how reality is put together. But also more importantly for this conversation, it's going to help you understand how you do business right and well. The I is the domain of beauty. It's how we create beauty in the world. The we is the domain of ethics, and the it is the domain of science and technology. So for the entrepreneur, we need to look at this within our businesses. The I in the business is the entrepreneur. It's that version of you, that role, that choice that you make to go out and be a person who has a business and has a way of giving your gift out into the world so other people can benefit from it. The you is the client, the person that you serve, the collective of people that you serve, the community that you're lifting up. And the it is the offer. Your offer is the way that you create a thing that you and the client can interact with. So if you understand and really have strategies for how you operate as an entrepreneur, as an I, for how you seek and invite clients, and how you take them through a transformational experience through your offer, you are activating a metaphysics in your business. And doing that well is what allows your business to scale and grow. So we want to examine these three relationships very carefully, because one of the major hangups for spiritual entrepreneurs is they don't want to be perceived as transactional. So if we order these three types of relationships appropriately, and we do the cognitive work to understand how we build businesses that really acknowledge and start with care, then we can work towards power. And power is inherent in all relationships. People come to you because in the domain they want to learn from you you are more powerful. There is a natural gradient of power because you've studied, because you've learned, because you are doing what you're doing. You have a thing that they want. So there is inherently more power there. Here's a really important note on power and hierarchy. Most spiritual entrepreneurs are going to have an aversion to that. It's going to feel contracted and cringy, because the way they've experienced power and hierarchy in the past is by people using that power and hierarchy to manipulate and take power and goodness and care and energy from others. That's not okay. And you're not going to do that. You can't do that. It's not in your being. It's not in your makeup. It's not a part of who you are. you are going to use the realization of your awakening that we are in fact all one as a way to utilize your power in a conscious way to not take power from others, but to lift them up into the experience that they want to have, that they came to you for. So this power is sacred. This power is good, and we want to utilize and acknowledge this power and find ways to engage with it in a healthy way inside of ourselves by choosing to be visible, choosing to be seen, choosing to be acknowledged for the power that we've cultivated, not for a reinforcement of our own ego, but to say, I'm here and I can help. I want to help you have the experience that you most want to have. I've learned some things along the way. Would you like to learn those things too? When care is fundamental, power is acknowledged and conscious, we can move to transaction. Transaction is also historically been a dirty word, and it doesn't need to be. Transaction is how we make agreements about how we're going to move forward, and we concern ourselves with compensation. Compensation is a right and good thing to do. Money is a unit of value exchanged. This value gets compensated through money. That is a transaction. If transaction is centered alone without care, that doesn't feel good. That's historically what's happened in modernity, in that center, first and second standard deviation under the bell curve. Again, you're not going to be able to do that. We need to take the examination of care, right relationship to power, and find ways to do transaction that feel outstanding for you, that feel right and good and aligned, so that you know every time you receive dollars from someone else, it's a win for you, it's a win for them, and it's a win for all of humanity. Now, I obviously can't address every question a spiritual entrepreneur is going to have, but I want to address one next important one, and that is pricing. There is so much shadow in the community of spiritual entrepreneurs about pricing. How do I get my value? What is my value? How do I ask for money? How do I invite people to experience my value? And how do I find a price for that is actually going to serve me, but not disincentivize them from being a part of what I would love to deliver them? So this way of looking at pricing is something that I've been working on for a long time, and I want to invite you into a set of considerations here for how you would like to engage in your business. We've already said that the metaphysics of reality works on the I, the you, and the it. In business, we've said that I, you, and it is the entrepreneur, the client, and the offer. But pricing has historically just focused on the entrepreneur and the offer. And we've used manipulation and marketing and tactics to try to force people into making decisions that were not a right and good fit for them. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Over the last decade of serving and healing entrepreneurs and all manner of people, both from 20,000 sessions as an energetic chiropractor, healer, and running a healing office, as well as 8 years of coaching, working with all manner of entrepreneurs, from people who are just starting out to those who are in 6, 7, 8, and 9-figure businesses, I've come to learn if you give your work away for free or at too low of a cost, it serves no one. It may seem like it's the caring thing to do, but if it's the caring thing to do, you've not activated all sides of those three relationships like I mentioned before. You're operating from care, but you're not operating from power. That power needs to exist, not to, again, have power over, but to invite your client into their own power. And the truth that I've come to the deep understanding of is that people get better results when they're a little bit uncomfortable. I call this the neurological stretch. When we find the right balance between relaxation and a little bit of stress, we pay attention and we focus and we take things seriously. So traditionally, this has been called having skin in the game. This is the integral pricing model. And it's going to focus on some of the things that we've already talked about. The big three, the I, the you, the it, modernity, and that center standard deviation under the bell curve, and objective materialism. So modernity and just doing things that are logical and rational without feeling is not going to feel good. And having pricing that is just objective, that doesn't consider the client, is also not going to feel good. But the other side of this is that if it's purely subjective and it's only a pay what you can, it's going to become under-energized. I've seen people do this, and it might be the right strategy for a certain launch or a certain product, but you can't run a business that way. It's not going to sustain you enough in order to make the jump into your next level of evolution that you need to take. So, how do we do pricing? How do we do business in a way that feels right and good? So, of course, what I'm going to tell you here is there's not one right answer. But what you get to be in the investigation of for yourself is how you show up powerfully and invite your clients into their power. How you engage the mechanism of that neurological stretch that holds them in the dynamic tension of having enough skin in the game to pay attention and be committed and be focused and use their attention in a way to build what they want, but not so relaxed, not enough skin in the game that they don't take the process seriously. So you need to find the right relationship for your client. And this may happen by finding the avatars that are in a income range that actually has the right dynamic tension built in, or if you're working in a wider income range, have a mechanism for pricing that helps to engage each person, find their own dynamic stretch, their own dynamic tension, and do the pricing model that works to enact that within them. This second way is more work. It's not always the right answer, but it will be the right answer for some of you some of the time. And no one talks about this. And this is exactly why I want to present this as an opportunity for you, because we need to create ways to have more inclusion, have more people take a part of this gift and this service that you are meant to build. And this is intersubjective value. This is the we-oriented value. This is how we center community and center the right people into cohorts in order to get the energetics active and the transformational really focused and developed so that we can all be in this rising tide of lifting each other up. In conclusion, we are presently in a season of winter. That needs to be acknowledged. The way you do business now is not the way that you do business 10, 20, 30 years ago. There's a different set of rules of how you operate in winter. And the way that we experience ourselves, our energy, our focus and attention, and the way that we take care of others is more important now than it's been for the last 70 years. Entrepreneurship is ready for a revolution. A conscious awakening, a way of engaging that is new and different. And it's people like you and I who I believe are meant to lead that charge, meant to be the vanguard, meant to lift each other up and experience reality in a new way and create services and products that are built from all three of these perspectives, centering care without dropping your power and inviting a transaction that actually liberates us all. We need to invoke and center our spirituality, our ethics, our personal and cultural maturation. None of these things can be left behind, and they don't have to be left behind. There's ways to integrate all of this and acknowledge all of this and operate from the advanced, complex perspectives that are part of that second tier, teal level of integral development that is what we are here and building on the planet. And we need to decolonize success. Success historically has been the bastion and the bulwark of men and women who have not operated ethically, who have not had the best in mind and in heart for those that they serve. That's not okay anymore. We're grateful for the work that they've done, and we're ready to take it from here. It's time for the conscious and the spiritual entrepreneurs to step up and claim the success that they know that they're meant to have and that they want to help others have so that we can all be in this win-win-win. And it's time for us and for all of humanity to experience a grand flourishing. It's time for all of us to be at the table and taking a part of this beautiful world that we get to inhabit, this beautiful life that we get to be born into, and to utilize our devotion and our commitment and our service to others by finding those gifts deep inside of you, being in the joy of their understanding and their acknowledgement and their cultivation, and then finding mechanisms for giving that gift away in the world in a manner that makes everything and everyone better. This is what I call the GTBW3 business model. That's goodness, truth, beauty, and the win-win-win. When you create businesses from goodness, truth, beauty, and the triple win, everything that business touches becomes better. It may be a slower path. It may be a longer path. It may be a more conscious path, but it's the journey I believe that you're here to make. I know it's the journey I'm here to make. Lastly, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for who you are, how you be. Thank you for the work you do in the world. Thank you for taking this hero's journey of spiritual entrepreneurship. I know it's not easy, and I know a lot of you feel alone, and I don't want you to feel alone. As I mentioned before, I've created a group called the Enlightened Entrepreneurs. It's a free group that you can come be in community and have these conversations. I've created a course of learning in there for free, in which you can learn much of these being-oriented techniques, because I know that 80% of the work of success for spiritual entrepreneurs is how we be. And when we have energized alignment in our being, the doing becomes apparent and obvious, and we can build the businesses that are going to save the world.